Hello, all the ACCA students who are going to give an exam in this December 2020. How are you all feeling? The exams are just 2 weeks. Nervous, excited, confident, right? I have come up with a review of the examiner's report of for SBL of July 2020. I don't have the latest sessions examiner's report, which was September 2020. So I have taken the previous one, July 2020. The main aim of going through this examiner's report is for you to highlight your strengths, your weaknesses, and how to overcome. You will know what are the mistakes candidates often do, frequently they do, and how to overcome those. So that's why I have come up with the review of the examiner's report. So we'll quickly go through this examiner's report. Okay. The examining team shared their observations from the marking process to highlight strengths and weaknesses in candidates' performance and to offer constructive advice for future candidates. Due to pandemic, the June 2020 was postponed and set in July 2020. Not everyone was able to set, right? Only few. So this report labeled July 2020 refers to this exam. Now, these are the general comments. And here they have given the format of the exam, right? The examination consisted of 4-hour exam with a single compulsory section about a company. You all know that. Open space. So the company which they got in July 2020 was Open Space that operated 250 business centers. So they are giving a background of a company. Each of the business centers was comprised of a number of flexible office workspaces that offered a wide range of business service to both individual clients and companies. The candidate's role throughout the exam was as a senior business manager working at the Open Space head office in the fictitious country of Poland. Okay, so marking it includes 80 technical, 20 professional skill marks. You all, I'm not going into detail of that. You can read it by yourself, right? So now let's go to the exam performance. Overall, the standard of the candidates' answers resulted in one of the poorest sittings of SBL so far. So this paper was the poorest paper. There could be so many of issues, the pandemic issues affecting, and so many other issues. We'll go through them in detail, one by one. So now let's see the difference between a stronger and a weaker candidate. The stronger candidate, they integrated. Let me highlight this. Integrated and used the content of the case study. Case study exhibits provided throughout all the answers. So they have used the content of the case study exhibits in all their answers and they have integrated the case. You don't have to look into each exhibit in isolation. All the exhibits are related. You have to take an integrated approach. So the ones who have taken an integrated approach and used the case study throughout the answer is a stronger candidate. Okay. Selecting relevant technical syllabus knowledge to support the applied points they are making. They demonstrated professional skills through analysis and discussion and how they structured and presented their answers. It's not only important what are the points you are making, but it is equally important how you are structuring and how you're presenting your answers, your presentation skills. So they demonstrated professional skills. Now let's go and see what's with the weaker candidate. Weaker candidates tended to produce very theoretical answer, right? So it's very theoretical answer, often based on rote learning of syllabus areas. You should not do this. Rote learning of syllabus area. Let me put a cross. Right? And here also. So these are not the right answer, and we'll put integrated, used, demonstrated professional skills. So you see the tick points are the ones which you have to consider, the cross ones are the ones which you should not do. Okay, and did not integrate the case. Did not integrate the case. Let me highlight it. Right? Did not integrate the case material into the answers. So the weaker candidates, they failed to apply the answers to open space circumstances. Once again, failed to apply answers to open space circumstances, often ignoring the scenario altogether. Let me again put a cross right here. So you can see the weaknesses and the strength of a stronger candidate. When you go for your exam, don't do this mistakes. Your answer should not be just theory based. You should integrate and apply your answer to the open space circumstances, not general answers. Okay, it was apparent that some candidates had not used the learning support produced by ACCA for SBL, particularly the following. So these are the following that you have to use. And weaker candidates haven't used this while learning SBL. Past papers and specimen exams. I have gone through the specimen 1, the whole paper. You can check, you can go through those videos and refresh your knowledge. So past exam paper and specimen exams. That is listed as first because that is the key. That's very, very important. Second, the examiner's approach article. How an examiner is approaching. We'll go through that as well. The importance of effective communication. All this you will get on your ACCA website. There are articles, right? The 10 things to learn from September 2018 seating and various videos and articles on how to plan and take SBL exams. If you are doing self-study, you have to be more cautious of your approach because you don't have anyone, right? So you are taking the full responsibility. So it's your duty that you go through all the videos and articles before you actually go for the actual exam. Because with the tutor, the scenario is a bit different. The tutor will be giving you all the guidance and will be telling you what are the things you have to avoid and what are the things you have to do. But when you're doing self-study alone, you are not under any tutor, right? Then you have to search on and you have to see how to approach the various videos and articles. So now let's go. At the start of the exam, candidates should spend sufficient time analyzing all of the requirements and then reading and assimilating the information contained in the case study exhibits. Exactly what I have told you. First you have to read your requirements, then you have to go to the case study. And this approach will help. Okay, let me again highlight it. So start of the exam, analyzing all of the requirements. And then reading, assimilating information contained in the case study exhibits. So first you have to do reading of requirements, then you have to read the case study in detail when you get the paper. Don't ever go and read requirement 1 and start answering. Right? So this approach will help to structure their answers around the requirements and use the relevant scenario content to develop their answers. Often answers fail to make sufficient reference to the exhibits. Your answer should make reference to the exhibits or fail to use a full range of material contained in the exhibits. Some answers also demonstrated that candidates have not read the exhibits sufficiently carefully. For example, failing to identify specific areas, environmental regulation in Exhibit 5. So you know that you are going to get something in environmental regulation. Before drawing up the two presentation slides, as this would have helped to populate the content of the answer. Just because you know something about environmental regulation, don't try to put general answers there, right? reducing pollution, right? Taking care of the environment. All these are general points. So whenever you have to write something on, some terms are very open-ended, right? General, you can write anything. For example, ethics, environment. You have to make sure that you read the exhibit and then you answer specifically using exhibits, not general answers. There were 6 exhibits. Yes, you'll be seeing 6 exhibits, 5 to 6 exhibits. Okay. Compromise background information, explanation about open space business model to provide context for the answers, provide useful information that underpinned range of applied points that candidates could be making their answers, highlighted the most important issues that answers should cover, helped candidates to decide how best to logically structure their answers. In the exhibits, you'll be given all this. Okay, now candidates should carefully read the exhibits with the requirements of every task in mind. Carefully read exhibits with requirements of every task in mind. Whenever you read exhibit, don't forget about the requirements. That's why while reading requirements the first time, highlight the keywords so that you remember what are the requirements. While you are reading exhibit, you can make a note the exhibits, as this will help them identify which task will be drawing on the material in which exhibit. It should be noted that exhibits are not necessarily ordered in the same sequence as the task. Okay, so your exhibits are not ordered in the same way your requirements are. For example, requirement 1, don't think that it's requirement 1 that means you'll be using exhibit 1. Requirement 2, exhibit 2, requirement 3, exhibit 3. It's not like that. Requirement 1 can have exhibit 1 or 5 or 2 or 3, like that. It can be in any order. In this exam, Open Space Business Review and Independent Market Research included material that was relevant to most of the tasks in the exam. So exhibit 1 and exhibit 2. In almost all of the exam, you must have seen that 1 or 2 exhibits you will be using it throughout all your requirements. They are like a key, they are like very important, right? Even the specimen 1 we have gone through, we saw that we used exhibit 1 almost like throughout the paper. Now let's go to the next para. Candidates should be alert for links between different exhibits reinforcing or contrasting significant issues. For example, the memo to the operation director required an explanation of the governance arrangement at open space. So governance arrangement is another word. And the social responsibilities expected of open space as a corporate citizen. So social responsibilities. However, candidates should appreciate that merely reproducing material from the exhibits without commenting on it or developing points further will not score marks. This is very important. Let me again put cross to this, right? So, merely reproducing materials. You are just copy pasting some of the information, some of the keywords from the exhibit to your answer, or you are developing that points a little further, you will not score marks. That piece of information, you have to use it. You have to come up with something which is value adding, not copy paste the same material and right? For example, in your exhibit, you have been given sales is reducing by 25%. Exactly the same piece of information you copy pasted in your answer saying sale is reducing or sale have declined by 25%. But that's not enough. You also have to say how the sales is declining, why the sales are declining, what could be the issue, how, using other exhibits, right? And how can you come up with some solutions to this? So if you include this points, how to come up, recommendation and all this, then your answer becomes a value adding answers and you will get marks. So just copy pasting will not help you. In particular, it was noted that a number of candidates sitting exams on computer, because it was a CB exam, right? Simply cut and pasted material from the exhibits into the answers without adding anything to it. Simply cutting and pasting material from the exhibits into answers without adding anything to it. This approach earned them no marks. Again, let me put a cross so that you remember that you're not supposed to do it, right? Candidates must also spend sufficient time planning and considering carefully what they will write to ensure that the answers are. Before you write, I know some of you have this tendency, have this habit. As soon as you get the paper, you just want to write because you are like you feel that you're wasting so much of time by planning. But actually, in fact, you need to spend more time in planning because proper planning will help you to save time while you're writing answers. Because I personally, I take more time when I have to plan an answer. Everything will be in my mind, right? Or I will write somewhere, I will write down. This is how I'm going to start my report. This will be my introduction, 2 lines. This will be what will be the subtopics or subheading under my main body of my report and my conclusion. So I have a plan already, right? I don't mind spending a little more time on plan than writing an answer because when I spend more time, when I have a proper plan at time, I don't have to cut or I don't have to, you know, keep cutting and writing again and again. It looks very dirty, it looks very untidy, it's not even professional when you keep cutting and all. When you keep cutting and all, it shows that you are not planned. You haven't done proper planning because if you have done proper planning, you will not do so much of cutting and all. And it wastes more time also. You're cutting and writing again, cutting, writing again. Don't think while you're writing. All your thinking, all your planning you must have done before you actually write. And when you write, you just write the points. You know what are the points. So spend more time in planning than in writing your answers. Your answers will be great, will be a better quality answers, right? Okay. So candidates spend sufficient time planning, considering carefully what they will write to ensure that the answers are covering all aspects of task requirements. All your task requirements. Under one requirement, you will be seeing comma this, comma that, explain, identify, explain, and recommend. So there are 3 requirements which you have to do under one requirement. Identify, explain, recommend. So you have to cover all the aspects. As marks are available for every element marks are available. And it is hard to score a passing mark without answering everything asked. Right? Next, structured logically. Your answer needs to be structured logically, and this will not come to you without proper planning. If you don't spend some time on planning, I would not say spend, I would say rather invest your time in planning. It's like an investment you're doing. So towards the end of the exam, while you're writing, you're saving time. So you invest, if you spend proper time in planning, you will have that logic in your answer, right? So structured logically, ideally in line with the way the task has been presented. For example, that if they ask you the 3 requirements, identify, explain, and recommend. You don't go and start recommending first. First, you have to identify. That's logic. Second, you have to explain. Third, you have to recommend. Third, balanced in terms of depth of discussion, required with the breadth of points to be made. Simply making points superficially will score very few marks. You are just writing points, right? You are, for 10 marks, you are writing 10 points, not explaining in detail, will not score you any marks. Rather, if you're just writing 5 points, but you're developing, you're explaining, elaborating those 5 points in depth properly, you will score far better marks. And not okay, sorry, the fourth one, covering the most significant points and issues. There will be thousands of issues, thousands of points that you can make, but you have to choose. You have to prioritize which are the significant points, and those only you have to cover, right? Not padded out with a material that does not address the task requirement, as this approach scores no marks at all. Don't try to put too much of information, too much of material from the exhibits into your requirements if it does not answer your requirement. The vast majority of candidates answered okay all the tasks. Although significant number fail to complete one or more of the tasks in full. This will happen to most of you. You will not be able to complete one or two requirements properly. Never leave a question unattempted. Try to do at least, if you're running out of time, at least write 1 or 2 lines. But try to write. Don't try to keep anything incomplete. This suggested ineffective time management with many candidates performing strongest on task 1A. Yes, we start with task 1A. We are all high energetic. We have all this positive enthusiasm and all, thinking that we'll be able to finish the paper on time, and we're spending so much of time in task 1A. But when we go to task 3 or 4, the end of the task, we lose all the enthusiasm. We are in so much of hurry, right? Our handwriting is worse. We are not coming up with proper points. That is because of your ineffective time management. Your time management should be from the beginning, not towards the end of the paper. Before even you write, start writing answers. Okay. So indeed, some answers potentially scoring more than the 18 marks that were available. However, this left insufficient time to complete all of the other tasks to the required standard, therefore ensuring maximum marks in task 1A was likely to be at the expense of earning sufficient marks for the other task. And for many candidates, this resulted in total mark below 50. Don't think just because you have scored the highest, like you have attempted the mark which is having the highest marks, for example 18 marks, and you are leaving others which are for 3 marks, 4 marks, 5 marks, 6 marks, you will pass. Right? Never underestimate any question. All the questions, even if it's for 3 marks, even if it's for 1 mark, 2 mark, needs to be attempted. Candidates are strongly advised to attempt mock exams. Strongly advised to attempt mock exams before the actual exam under full exam conditions. I'm sure most of you don't do that. You just go through the answers of the mock exam paper. Right? Trust me. This is based on my own experience, and I've seen my other friends and other students. When you go through a mock exam, just go through the answer, and versus when you actually write the answer under the exam condition under 4 hours, you practice, and then you come to the actual exam conditions. Let me tell you this: the performance, your performance on the actual exam conditions are totally different. When you just read your answers, right, when you go to the exam condition, you will forget everything. You will panic. But when you practice, you become very confident that when you go to the exam condition, you will never be scared. You have that confidence. You'll be very confident. Automatically, the time management will come in you. Automatically. Because it is in your subconscious mind. You have been practicing this. Daily, you have been doing a paper. You have conditioned your mind that my mind has to focus only on this for 4 hours, and I'm only going to work on this. Because what happens is when you are doing a mock exam or attempting past paper at home, we have so much of other things coming in here, there. We cannot actually set our mind for the 4 hours because our mind is wandering here, there, everywhere. You cannot just set your mind in one place. That is why it's very important that you actually go through this process. You have to torture yourself. You have to tell to your mind, you have to tell to yourself, hello, okay, this 4 hours is completely I'm going to give on SBL. I'm going to do my mocks and I'm not going to focus on anything until you become perfect in that actually your mind does not go around anywhere. You have to keep practicing. Because writing SBL paper also requires a lot of your mental effort plus your physical effort. Sitting for 4 hours, just imagine. doing nothing, just writing paper is a challenge, is a very big challenge. I can understand, but you need to practice. You have to go through that. Every candidate, whoever has passed, has gone through that. So candidates, okay. So this will help them to get used to the challenging demands on concentration, thinking, writing, organization of time, their 4-hour exam presence. See how many tasks you have to do in this 4 hour. You have to concentrate. You have to think. You have to come up with an answer. You have to write. You have to organize your time. All this multitasking in just 4 hours. Okay. Although answer planning is definitely recommended, some candidates wrote elaborate and lengthy plans which then they crossed out and subsequently ran short of time in answering the task. So don't write your plans very lengthy. It should be very short. If you're writing some plans on your answers, it should be very short, not lengthy points. Because when you write it, when you answer the actual task, you are running out of time. Okay. Candidates also wasted time by making the same point twice. Okay, let me write this. Highlight. So this needs to be highlighted and same point twice. Yes, don't beat around the bush, just come to the point. Or more in slightly different ways in the same requirement. Just you are changing the words here and there, but you're actually picking the same point twice. Please don't do this. Right? Or more in, okay. Markers will not give additional marks for points which are repeated or restated even if slightly reworded. Okay, reworded. Apart from wasting valuable exam time, repetition of points can also have an adverse impact on the general professionalism demonstrated, so can affect the professional mark awarded. If you write a point twice, not only your technique, like you will not get any marks and wasting time, but also they will not give you the professional marks also. Even your professional marks will go down because it shows a lack of professionalism. And this is a professional paper. So you have to write, you have to think, you have to act like a professional. Always you have to take care of that professionalism throughout the paper. The vast majority of candidates answer the tasks in order which is recommended, right? This is because future exams may have task requirements that follow timeline or progress in consecutive way. So I also recommend please follow the tasks in order. In many candidates, those candidates who failed the exam did so because of. Now, please focus here. List all these points. You might be falling into one or two or three or almost all of the categories, right? So make sure you're not in this category and you are in the strong candidates category. First one, lack of analysis skills with an inability to select relevant information to answer task requirements. You are not able to select the relevant exhibit, the relevant information for the task. Okay, inability to select relevant information. Second, failing to explain why the points made were significant in the context of the task requirements. Okay, so failure to explain why points were significant. Third, general lack of commercial awareness and not relating the answer to open space. Not relating answer to open space. Fourth, failing to respond to the requirements in a professional and commercial manner. Okay, wasting time making irrelevant points. This is one of the major reason for failing. Wasting time making irrelevant points or repeating points already made. Failing to provide everything that the requirement specified. You're just answering part of the requirement, not everything. For example, identify, explain, recommend. You are only identifying and explaining, but you are not recommending. Not answering the whole exam paper. Yes. Okay, so to gain each technical mark, candidates need to make points to address the specific requirements of the task, considering the scope of the answer required and what the task verbs used to indicate verbs used indicate should be provided, applied to the open space organization and the environment featured in the case study, were specific to the decision or situation covered in the task, show the reader why the point being made was significant in the circumstances described. Okay. So the simple demonstration of technical knowledge or an explanation of the syllabus does not earn marks in the exam. Weaker candidates give theoretical answers based on textbook knowledge rather than relating the answer to specific circumstances. Right? For example, the project management technique to be described in task 2B were not then evaluated in terms of the usefulness with project Y1, which was the whole point of the question. So you will be getting a project management, right? Technical framework can help generate ideas. However, by simply using technical frameworks as the basis for structuring answers led many candidates into forcing the answers to fit the framework. This means they produce answers. For example, you're using posters, pestle. Let's say pestle you're taking. And by using pestle, you're only getting information for the first four. The first three, let's say, political, economic and social. You're not getting factors for legal and technological. So what happens is most of the candidates then they try to force their answer so that they cover all the points of the pestle. This you should not do, right? So the SBL exam does not encourage candidates to try to use a model of framework whenever they can. Instead of using a framework as a basis of their answers, candidates are often better off using different elements of the task requirements as a basis of structuring the answers. So SBL is not encouraging to use models specifically, that you only have to use models to answer your questions. Even without models, you can answer your questions and get the marks. Okay. However, there were several tasks that allow candidates to use syllabus models, yes, and frameworks that could have helped to effectively structure the answer. For example, in task 1C, it would have been possible to discuss the cultural issues arising from adopting the new environmental practice by using various elements of cultural web. So, yes, let me highlight so that you can go and learn all this. And the puppet framework could have been used in the same task to suggest how the cultural issues could be managed. Now let's go to the professional skill. Right? Candidates' overall professional skill marks often reflected their disappointing performance as regarded technical marks in the exam with a number of common faults. So examiner is saying that the candidates they earn fairly well enough in their technical skill compared to the professional skill. Why is that? Let's go. First, failing to provide all the tasks required. For example, in task 3, only discussing the strategic benefits of adopting new technologies. Right? So you have to know the strategic benefits of new technologies, because I've told you, you will never get a question without technology involved in that. In a sitting, right? In a sitting of SBL, you will be getting a question in technology. So you have to be well prepared and well aware of the new technologies and the benefits of it. In his business center without covering the related risk. Failing to demonstrate understanding of the impact on the open space business model. You also have to know a business model. Not paying sufficient attention to the specific answer format required. For example, they're telling you to prepare a presentation and you are writing in a report, or you're not preparing a presentation. Even if you're technically correct, you will lose your professional marks. Right? With some candidates using the same basic format throughout the whole exam. Failing to appreciate the usefulness of the document produced by the answer for the needs of the stated user. For example, not explaining the role and responsibilities of project manager to the finance director for her new role as a project sponsor. So, You also have to know what is a project sponsor. Failing to produce a balanced answer, for example, failing to discuss the mitigating actions to address the risks arising from the accusation of by one task. Okay. Now, candidates should remember that they are carrying out a professional task that has a particular purpose for a defined user. Candidates must read technical and professional requirements together, not in isolation. Together you have to read. And this will help them develop answers showing the correct style, tone, level of professionalism. You have to work on this. An example of this was task 1, where candidates were required to produce 2 presentation slides for business development directed to them present to the board. Many candidates simply drew up 2 slides about the most stringent environmental standards with accompanying notes without giving any consideration to that this would form part of a wider board level discussion that they would be implemented using internal management controls that the board would be ultimately accountable for. So the professional skills were for demonstrating communication skills, right? How the slides and notes are presented. Now, let's go to the CBE, the computer-based exam. This was the second time SBL was to run partly as a computer-based, but with only a small number of candidates at a limited number of centers being involved. There was no significant difference in the performance between candidates sitting exams on a computer and a paper. So, your doubt has been cleared now that there have not been a significant difference, right? With the candidates who are sitting exams on computer or paper. So you cannot tell that just because you are giving an exam on a computer, you are not able to perform well or you are failing. And if you would have write on a paper-based exam, you would have passed because there is not a much significant difference. Okay, and the same strengths and weaknesses being common to both. So even with the computer-based, it's the same. The strengths and weakness of the candidates. Still, candidates are having the same issues. Time management issues, not answering the requirements in full. Whereas the quality of the answers of quite a number of candidates sitting on a computer declined towards the end of the exam. This was also true of many sitting the paper-based exam and probably for the same reason of poor time management. A clear benefit of computer-based format was that many scripts, including those that scored low technical marks, were presented well with a good use of headers and paragraphing. This made them easier to mark, and the use of the presentation tab was particularly helpful for task 1B, and I expect the presentation spreadsheet tab will be good for future exams with a computational element. So you can also expect some calculations to be done in the spreadsheet tab. Okay, so let's go. Candidates taking the exams on a computer strongly recommend to take mocks on computer first, to gain experience of dealing with different types of exhibit on screen and also to estimate how much they can write in the time allowed. Many candidates copied material in from the task requirements and content of the exhibits. Copying the task requirements had the advantage that candidates did not need to look keeping at the requirement exhibit and may have helped keep them to be more focused on the task. However, as discussed above, candidates who simply cut and pasted in an exhibit material without commenting on it further could not be awarded marks. Now specifically they are going to the each task in detail. That was general comments. Task 1A. I will be going a little fast because we have so much of tasks to cover. Otherwise, then this video will become around 2-3 hours discussion only. Okay, so this task has 2 elements in the form of a brief report to the board of open space, right? Not a lengthy report, but a brief report. And the format of a report and a brief report is almost similar only. Candidates were required to evaluate a proposal to acquire and then analyze the risk associated with the proposal and suggest ways to mitigate the risk identified. So it's like an accusation proposal and you have to mitigate the risk. So this task required a careful review of exhibit 1, 2 and 3. Just see, it's one too many. They are requiring for one requirement 3 exhibits to identify those factors that would contribute to the evaluation of the proposal. Exhibit 3 is provided background information on the target company, Wyvern, as well as detail on its recent financial performance. This could have been related to the detail of OpenSpace business model Exhibit 1 when strategically evaluating the proposal from OpenSpace's perspective. Exhibit 2 had useful information about the office service industry in Leland, the country at which Wyvern operates. And this would have helped to identify some of the risks that could be faced by OpenSpace if they proceeded with the accusation. So this shows you that you also have to know some advantages, some disadvantages, how to get a mitigate risk in a case of an accusation of a company in a different country for SBL, right, for the future SBL exam. This was the best answered question on the paper, with many candidates producing very comprehensive answers to part I, in fact, often too detailed. So your answer should not be too detailed also, just for the mark. Because you're wasting so much of time in task 1 that you're not able to focus on the next task. That should also not happen. Not too less, not too much, just the right balance, just the right amount should be written. Most candidates scored highly on this question, with many students gaining 14 or more marks out of 18. Sounds interesting. In part, many candidates use the suitability, acceptability, feasibility framework. Yes, which was the most suitable choice. So whenever you have to go for a choice, right, especially for accusation, this type of question, you can use SAF model. Suitability, acceptability, feasibility. Is the accusation suitable? Is the accusation acceptable? Is the accusation feasible? So you can frame your answer using this three, right? Suitability, acceptability, feasibility framework. Whenever you are given a choice, under, for example, accusation, right? Under this condition, so you can use this framework for any other answers where you have been given a choice whether you should go or whether you should not go for it. A minority successfully used alternative strategic analysis models. So also other models which have been used by very minority of students are SWOT, Pestel and Porter's diamond. It was good to observe that many candidates did use the exhibit's information extensively, with many attempting to calculate the percentage drop in profit, customers' numbers, for variant to support their answers. So you can see that you also need to do some calculations to support answers. Most candidates were also able to discuss a good range of risks in part of the answer, with most recognizing the relevance of regulatory risk and the currency risk. Exactly, it's in a different country, right? So you will be facing regulatory and the currency risk. However, weaker candidates omitted to discuss risk at all or omitted to discuss ways to mitigate risk. Some candidates indicate the risk of the accusation within the evaluation and then repeated the same points within the risk section. Clearly, this impacted on their professional marks. What happens is, in the first part of the requirement, first part, you are writing, and in the second part also you are repeating, avoid. Just avoid. So these are the significant weaknesses which can be summarized as, before we go to task 1B. Okay, spending too much on this task affecting performance later in exam, using inappropriate strategic analysis models and frameworks to generate ideas when the question was concerned with strategic evaluation of the accusation. You don't have to do any strategic analysis or something. It's strategic evaluation. Risk not specifically related to the decision under consideration as a result of the accusation. So the risk, don't go and write any kind of risk. Okay, technological risk, environmental risk. Risk has that risk have to be specifically for that decision. What decision? This is accusation. So you have to think from the point of the accusation. What kind of risk can emerge? For example, under this condition, currency and regulatory risk, because they're operating in a different country. But if they're not operating in a different country, if they were in the same country, the target company and the one who is going to acquire, then you cannot say currency risk and regulatory risk. Regulatory risk, okay, but not currency risk, because they're the same country. Risk mitigation considerations were too brief and underdeveloped, not drawing up the answer as a report. If they ask a report, make a report. Don't write your answer in any form. The required framework. So not including a brief introduction and conclusion. Not including a brief introduction and conclusion. It's a brief report. Just because it's saying it's a brief report, don't think that you don't have to include an introduction and conclusion. You have to include a brief conclusion and introduction, same like a report. So limiting professional marks to a maximum of 1.33 out of 4. Can you see how less it is? Not even 50%. Not even 50% of the professional marks you have acquired. There was some correlation between technical and professional, which awarded for commercial acumen. Candidates who referred to the information provided in the supporting exhibits and considered a proposal from the perspective of open space scored well. Candidates who made minimal reference to scenario information tended to display no discernible commercial acumen and scored low professional marks. Some candidates scored low marks because they failed to write a brief report as required. Now let's go to task 1B. The task was also in two parts. Required candidates to produce 2 presentation slides with accompanying notes. So presentation slides you have to know, because I haven't sent a question paper from September 2018 till now. I haven't seen one question paper where they haven't asked a report, where they haven't asked a presentation slide. So you have to know the format, and it's not very difficult. It's very, very easy. We anyway use presentation in our everyday life, so you must be thorough with the layouts and all, right? Now let's go to the subtask 1. Should have formed the first presentation slides and notes. It was concerned with the actions that the board would need to take in order to comply with the most stringent environmental standards in Leland. Candidates should have been targeting 4 out of 10 marks for part. So ideally they would have identified up to 4 actions, right? From exhibit 2 and 3. 4 into 2. So you'll get the 8 marks. That means you have to come up with 4 points that open space would need to address. Technical marks are available for supporting notes only. Subtasks then required candidates to describe the features of an internal control system suitable for ensuring compliance with new regulations. This is also a key. Features of internal control system suitable for ensuring compliance with new regulations. Weaker candidates merely stated the elements of a generic internal control system, so failed to provide convincing answers on the main features of internal management control which open space would need in order to comply with regulations. For part, right, for the first part, some candidates did identify the actions corresponding to those presented in exhibit 5, but often the answer went little further. They're listing this with no real explanation offered. So they have just provided list, they didn't explain. Very few consider the need for communication and audit as detailed in ISO 14001 standard. Let's go to second part. This was not answered well by most, as few seem to understand the relevant features of suitable internal management control system. Yes, this is where the students' knowledge is also lacking. They have a very poor knowledge in this part. Internal management control system, the features. So this appears to be an area of weakness in syllabus knowledge, with candidates as questions like this are often answered badly on SBL. So make sure you know you updated with this, right? Update your knowledge. Many candidates just made observations about membership of the current board and corporate governance, and far too many simply suggested appointing an external expert. So this is what they have just recommended. Appoint an external expert without any reference to the case in hand. I've told you, whenever you have to make suggestions, recommendations, don't just say appoint external expert. Motivate employees. Why? Why they have to do in this case, that you have to explain. This are the other significant, okay? A weak link between the points on the slide and the supporting notes. Remember one thing, whenever you are making a presentation slide, okay, there should be a strong link between between the points you made on the slides and your supporting notes. Your supporting notes should be the ones, should explain the points on the slide in detail. That's it. It should not be something very different. Sometimes there was no evident link at all. Okay, some suggestions made like switching of lights, clearly sensible, were out of interest to the board. Okay, see, these are clearly sensible, but they were out of interest to the board who needed to think strategically, right? You cannot, whenever you give an idea, that idea should be something which should be an interest to the board. Yes, I believe it's sensible, but still it should be something which has to be of interest to the board. So you have to come up with a recommendation of like that, which is sensible and of interest to the board. Rare use of ISO 14001 information in Exhibit 5, even though it provided clear guidance. Some narrow, rather superficial and unconvincing points. Too much emphasis on corporate governance in part 2. So you don't have to do too much of emphasis on one single theory. For example, corporate governance. Just because you know corporate governance, Professional skill marks were available for communication skills by producing an answer that will be readily usable by the business development director when presenting to the board. Some candidates are still not sure of the correct way of preparing slides, although this should improve with the CBE exams. However, some of the CBE candidates did not use the slide format provided and prepare the slides in the workbook. A small minority of candidates did not produce any slides at all, so scored no professional marks. Many candidates scored low professional marks because they did not try to present a clear answer in the format required. Merely writing a couple of words in a box does not make it a presentation slide. This, let me highlight it because it's very important for most of the people, because they have this misunderstanding that if you draw a box and write a couple of words in that box, thinking it's a presentation slide, but it's actually not a presentation slide. Right? Task 1. See. Let's see how many tasks are here. Okay. Okay, task 1C. So this task required candidates to draft a memo. Right? Memo. So memo is also, you have to be familiar with how to draft a memo for the business development director that discuss the possible cultural issues that could arise in the current open space operation from the adoption of new stringent environmental practice, together with how this could be effectively managed. So they are talking about cultural issues in this task. This question was reasonably well answered, although only a few candidates used the obvious model, the cultural web, to structure their response. Right? I assume that most of you know all the elements in the cultural web. Some candidates only discussed the issue of individual members' objection to the new practice, with other cultural elements not discussed at all. Many candidates answered their questions as change management as opposed to culture, and although there is some overlap, it would be difficult to get the full technical marks and would negatively impact the professional mark awarded. If they asked about, right, for example, if they asked about culture, and you are saying about a change management, even though there is some overlap and is a little similar, still it will affect your technical marks. You will not get the full technical marks because the question is specifically focused on the culture, not change management. The better candidate, right, they recognized the potential resistance to new environmental practice and provide a reasonable range of actions to manage such resistance, including training, involving, and rewards. Right? It's common sense, right, that whenever something new practice or new environmental practice is being started in your organization, it is very common that most of 95% of the employees, the staff, they will be resisting to it. They will not be accepting it, objecting it, because as a human we don't like change. That is known as fear of unknown. We have this fear of unknown, right? We don't want to change. We just want to work in our current environment with the current practices and procedures and all. So whenever change comes, we are very fearful, we get scared, nervous, so we don't want to change, we resist. So this candidate is also, he knows that they will be resisting, and also coming up with solutions how to overcome that resistance, such as including training, involving, and rewards. Only a few candidates used the puppet model in this response, but this was not necessary if they use alternative change management approaches. Weaker candidates did not discuss the issue changes to the culture, other than to state that tasks and routines may have modifications. Instead, they repeated what they have written in 1B about actions to improve environmental behavior. Some candidates had clearly not read the question properly. Again, read your requirements as many times as possible until you clearly understand what you are expected to write. Just reading once is not enough. Read 2, 3, 4, 5 times, does not matter. No one is stopping you from reading it. Right? What are you losing so much by repeating? By reading many times. Okay, read as much as you can until you properly understood what you're supposed to write about. We just we read and then we try to answer the question, not even seeing whether what we are answering is actually what the requirement asked for, the task asked us to do. So some candidates, they have clearly not read the question properly and discussed the cultural clashes that would take place with the staff of Bayern after the accusation. This is something in a total different level they are talking about now. These are the other significant weaknesses. Okay, so merely describing the various elements of cultural web rather than applying it to the situation. Incorrectly focusing on board structure and the lack of any design committees. Considering the issues generically. Your answer should never be generic. Should never be general answers. And more in line with change management without applying the points discussed to the case, and poorly presented answers of limited usefulness to the target audience. Professional marks are also quite low on this one, as candidates did not answer, right? They did not demonstrate analysis skills in identifying an adequate range of cultural issues. Most answers simply did not present any real depth of analysis of the issues under consideration. Some candidates made minimal effort to link the cultural issues with the actions required to manage them effectively. Whenever you are coming with an issue, okay, and you also have to come up with recommendations, with solutions, how to manage them. There should be a link between the issues and the solutions you're coming with, right? It should make a proper sense. So make sure you do it. Let's go to 2A. This task required candidates to prepare briefing notes for use by the finance director in her new role as the sponsor of Five project. That means a project sponsor. The memo should have explained the project sponsor's role and responsibilities alongside those of the assigned project manager. You should know what is the difference between a project manager and project sponsor and what are the roles and responsibilities. All these are there on your textbook, and I will soon be making a video on this as well, right? This was relatively a straightforward task, provided that candidates use their project management syllabus knowledge in the context of project web specifically. However, it was hugely disappointing to see how many candidates, right, had such poor knowledge of this area of the syllabus. Right? Let me highlight. Project sponsor roles and responsibilities. And project manager. Because this usually comes towards the end of your chapter in your textbook. So most of the candidate students, they don't focus in that project management. That's a very boring chapter, I know. Like, things are pretty, it's like a dry subject. It's very boring to make it interesting and learn. So most of the candidates, what they do, they leave it, or they don't go much in detail to, right? So make sure that you know. Only a minority showed knowledge of this area of the syllabus has scored highly on this requirement. Many candidates presented confused and incorrect answers, demonstrating little or no knowledge of the roles and responsibilities of project sponsor and manager, two separate and distinct project roles. Project sponsor and project manager are not the same person. They are two different person with two different project roles. Okay, so it was quite evident from this answer that this syllabus area is being neglected by candidates. Don't make sure that you don't neglect this area. So they need to be reminded that all areas of the syllabus are equally weighted and can be examined on any exam. All the areas of the syllabus are equally important. Don't think one area of the syllabus is less important than the other. We quite often do this mistake. Weaker candidates only discussed the skills and the attributes of a project manager or a project sponsor rather than the roles and the responsibilities as required by the questions. Significant weaknesses are this: getting the two roles confused, like you're not sure what is a project sponsor and manager and then you're confusing the roles, like incorrectly suggesting that the project sponsor has an operational role. It is not the project sponsor who has this operational role, it is the project manager who has an operational role. Project sponsor is the one who is sponsoring, who is investing. So project manager, they have a duty, they are accountable, they have a responsibility towards the project sponsor to show them what's happening with the project. Failing to provide a clear and a balanced answer that would have been useful to the finance director when assuming her new project sponsor role. Not studying the project management area of the syllabus. This is the last area of the syllabus, project management, right? So make sure that you go through project management area and focusing purely on financial management aspects of the project for the project sponsor role, probably because the sponsor was the finance director in the case study. Wow. I didn't know that candidates were so smart, right? Well, I have no words to say. Just because the sponsor was a finance director, they are linking with the financial management rather than they have to link with the project management. Nice. So I can see some smart candidates here. Overly smart, I would say, right? So professional skills weak, communication skills demonstrated are very poor, and the ability to clarify the roles not demonstrated properly. Many students simply provide a list and did not distinguish the roles and responsibilities. Some candidates they only discuss project sponsor and totally omitted to discuss the project manager, so reducing their marks significantly. Task 2B. This task required candidates to draft a brief report, again a brief report, right? To the finance director distributing the key techniques that could be used to develop a project plan and how this would be useful with project. So you also need to know how to develop a project plan. This is under your project management chapter. This was answered very badly, which can be probably be put down to lack of relevant syllabus knowledge. Many candidates clearly demonstrated that they did not know the tools and techniques of project management. However, there are many some who did collectively consider tools relating to scope, objectives, budget, constraint, with credit given for correctly discussing Gantt charts, milestones, budgets. I guess soon I have to come with a project management chapter. Like I can see that. Some weaker candidates discussed anything and everything from project initiation documents to post-completion audits. The latter clearly not relevant to project planning. However, little credit was given to the weaker answers that discuss general strategic and financial planning tools such as NPV SWOT. Can you see they are not asking about NPV SWOT? It's not of any use in this condition. This is when you don't have a proper understanding of the syllabus area. There were a few candidates who discussed the new technologies in Exhibit 4 to answer this question, which was totally inappropriate and displayed a real lack of understanding. This could be because it was the next exhibit in the exam. Their answer needed to use this information. This is poor exam technique, right? Just because that is the next exhibit, right? And you think that you haven't used any information from that exhibit, so let me use the information from that exhibit in my answer, is a poor exam technique. Never do that. And something the students need to be made aware of. The exhibits are not necessarily in order of use, and they must not assume that because exhibit 1 to 3 were used in question 1, then exhibit 4 must relate to question 4. This I have to highlight. It's very important that you make note of this, that just because exhibit 1 and 3 are used in question 1, so that means for question 2, exhibit 4 I will use, and exhibit 1 and 3 I don't have to use anywhere again. That's a very wrong technique, very, very wrong, poor technique. It was notable that many candidates did not attempt this question. Why? Because they don't have a proper knowledge of project management. So they left this question without attempting. Therefore, throwing away 14 marks. My God. Candidates should be made very aware that failing to attempt any part of the exam reduces their chance of passing considerably. Let me tell you this. I have just left a question when I was giving my SBR paper. When I was, I think I have almost covered all the requirements, and there was this 6 marks question at the end, towards the end of the exam, and then I couldn't cover it, right? And the result was as expected. I failed. I failed at 43. By just not attempting that 6 marks, I reduced my chances of passing drastically. So never leave a question unattempted. After that day, like, that was my old time, and after I have never left any question which I write. I have never left any question. I have attempted all the questions. Because it was just 6 marks. If you just see 6 marks, what is 6 marks? It's just very small marks, right? While I have attempted 94%. But let me tell you that you are not even sure that the 94% which you have attempted, you will get, right? You will not get full marks there. You will be missing out somewhere there. So you cannot take the chance of just missing 6 marks, not even 1 mark. Not even 1 mark. Every mark counts, because your aim, your goal in ACCA is just to add up your marks till 50. Okay. So it was notable that many candidates did not attempt this question, therefore throwing a 14 marks. Candidates should be made very aware that failing to attempt any part of the exam raises the chance of passing considerably. In this situation, by not attempting task 2B, the maximum mark possible would be 86, and the pass mark of 50 represents 58% of this, which is above the overall average mark. That means you have to now score 58 out of 86 if you want to pass with 50. Forget about 58. People are failing at 45, 46, 47, 48, and you're thinking of 58. Right? So other significant weaknesses are this: answering too broadly and failing to focus on the project planning phase, incorrectly focusing on broad structure, lack of NADs and committees. See, lack of NADs and committees are not relevant to project management, right? It is something of corporate governance issues, not of project management issues. Identifying a correct technique but not evaluating its usefulness in this situation, therefore limiting the mark to be awarded, and appreciating that this will be the first time the finance director, in her role as project sponsor, would be involved in planning and not meeting her needs. Okay, the professional marks are available for evaluating the usefulness of this technique. Therefore, as a result of poor technical answers, professional skills are also poor for this question. Whenever you are writing a very when your technical answers are poor, right, even your professional skill marks, they are proportionate to that. Your professional skill marks also will suffer, because when your technical answers are very poor, you cannot gain that professional marks, right? You might get one or two, like here or there, but not, they work together. Your professional and your technical, they work together. If one affects, the other one will automatically will get affected. So make sure you work on both the skills. Okay, as it was very difficult to avoid evaluation marks if the tools and techniques were incorrect or missing. Task 2C. This task required candidates to write a memo, once again a memo, to the operation director explaining how governance arrangements and expected corporate social responsibilities. Okay, so governance arrangements, yes. Corporate social responsibilities, the CSR, would help open space attain corporate citizen status as detailed in Exhibit 6. They are using Exhibit 1 and 6. Just see the lab, right? Don't think that they will be using the next exhibit like 1, 2, or 3. It's not consecutive. It could be in any order. You could use any exhibit in any order for any requirements. Okay, so professional marks are available for demonstrating commercial equipment by explaining how aspects of corporate governance related to adopting corporate citizenship at the company. This question was not well answered by most candidates. Many did try to use Exhibit 6 as a structure, but often candidates merely rewrote what was in the exhibit with little or no attempt to consider the relationship between broad level governance and social responsibility expectations. Far too many answers focused incorrectly on the board structure and number of NADs and committee without considering anything at all about how this would address or impact the corporate governance, corporate social responsibility. Many answers made no link between the two at all. So always when you make answers, there should be link. Candidates came up with a considerable variety of answers, with most saying the 5 stages of delivering corporate citizenship or social responsibility, and others suggesting how open space should be restructured in order to adhere to governance arrangements and social responsibilities required to become a corporate citizen. The explanations consistently included the need for the board to establish a relevant audit committee and appoint more NEDs as a means of addressing compliance with regulations. However, not enough was written about what the board should actually be doing. Weaker candidates, okay, simply did not use any of the information provided in Exhibit 6 at all. And others, they just copied the information from the exhibit. So many candidates, they just wanted to write all they knew about corporate governance. Don't do this mistake also. Most of you become very happy, overly excited when you get a topic where you know most about, and you tend to write everything whatever you know about the corporate governance, about the topic which you are very familiar with, you know. Most of them which was irrelevant and did not answer the question asked. So these are the weaknesses. Evidence of poor understanding of this area of syllabus. Some critiquing the corporate governance structure without relating this to social responsibilities. So you need to relate your corporate governance structure with the corporate social responsibilities. Discussing the meaning of social responsibility without explaining how the corporate governance impacts on this. Ignoring the status of corporate citizenship entirely, which was the point of the question. Again, the professional skills are weak because the candidate did not understand how open spaces governance arrangements impact on the corporate citizenship. And answers also general, and commercial equipment is not displayed. Now the last task, task 3. This task required candidates to draft some briefing papers for the operation letter discussing both strategic benefits and potential risks associated with open space, adopting new technologies in its business sectors as developed detailed. Okay, so the exhibit provides 5 different technologies, the inclusion of which is a well-developed answer would have been sufficient to score off the available 60 technical marks. This question was well answered by many candidates. Exhibit 4 information was used well and candidates demonstrated some really good syllabus knowledge applying this knowledge to the open space. So most candidates, they identified a good range of benefits and risks which were able to consider the impact of those this on open space. The quality of the candidate answers differed considerably from those that really describe the technologies, adding only a few comments to the stronger candidates who discussed strategic benefits and risks, fully applying them to the open space business model. However, some of the answers demonstrated a deep understanding the internet and other existing technologies and how they benefit open space as well as the risk involved. The weaker candidates, on the other hand, they described what the technology does without explaining how that could be of benefit to open space or its client. For example, by reciting textbook learned definitions of the Internet of Things, right? You must have heard of this Internet of Things. This is even in your technical article, you will be going through this article, Internet of Things. So most of the candidates, they learn the definitions, they memorize some of the terms what they have gone through under the Internet of Things, and they come and write it here. They describe it here. But it's of no use because it's without relating to this to the business. They're not relating this to the business of open space. Some candidates were repetitive in the risk answers with data being hacked, used as the risk for more than one of the technologies. So there have been 5 technologies, right? So if I'm using for all the 5 technologies, the risk is being hacked, what do you think? It will affect, it shows that there's a lack of knowledge of the risk and also your professionalism. You're not professional. As most candidates, they present a balanced answer. Both benefits and risks are there. Okay, even skepticism has been showed and they scored well on professionalism. But there are weaknesses which are knowledge. Okay, simply knowledge dumping technologies. You are just memorizing, gathering information, knowledge about technology, this technology, that technology, this technology, right? Some of which were not even mentioned in the scenario relevant to the open space. So don't mention technologies which are not even mentioned in the scenario just because you know it. Poor presentation arising from a shortness of time. And professional marks are variable in this task, right? Some have been even given 4 marks. But since this is the last question, right, most candidates were not able to finish it because they were running out of time. So the answers were rushing, they were rushing through the answer. And finally comes the conclusion, right? This will be in every paper, right? The same conclusion. Candidates are not clear about how answers should be presented and they are simply dumbing their knowledge without applying to the case. And significant proportion of candidates did not even attempt all the questions. They spent too much time planning the answers and describing models, leaving less time to apply those in your answers, okay? So future candidates, they are strongly advised to undertake as much question practice as they can, getting feedback wherever possible. Just doing question paper, enough question paper is not enough if you're not getting an appropriate feedback, because how do you know that you're on the right track, that the answers, because you'll be making the same type of answers, you'll be coming up with the same type of answers, same type of recommendation, same type of presentation. How will you know that where are your strengths and weakness? So you need someone who can review your work, someone who can give an honest feedback. It could be your colleague, it could be your friend, it could be your tutor, it could be anyone, right, in your group. So make sure that you get a proper, accurate, honest feedback about the questions which you are attempting so that you are on the right track. So that's it for this video. These were all the techniques which I have gone through shortly, right? And I hope that all this are very useful for you and you will make use of this video. Now it's your job to share this on your social media among your friends. Exams are coming near, so you have no time to waste, but only practice. Because practice makes a man perfect. Thank you. And we'll catch you on my next video. Thank you.